Hello and welcome to Premodern Ankh Tide. Now in this video I am trying out some new editing things I learned, so I really would appreciate your feedback. Do you think it makes the videos better or is it slightly more annoying? So thank you for that. Now this deck works around the 2-card combo of Ankh of Mishra and Ankh Tide, hence the name Ankh Tide. Whenever a land comes into play, the Ankh will deal 2 damage to that land's controller. So yep, fetch lands will really hate this card. But it's excellent with Ankh Tide, which has 5 counters and can remove a whole bunch of our opponent's lands. And then next turn in our upkeep, when we don't have a fading counter to remove, the Tide will leave play, bringing all those lands back, and boom, a huge amount of damage to our opponent. But this is actually not a combo deck. We're actually using all of our tempo cards to kind of chip in damage, and it just happens that we have 2 cards that work well individually that when combined can often win the game. So it's really not all out combo. So for creatures, we're playing some of the most efficient red creatures that you're probably used to from Sly. These are really good at chipping in early damage, and 2 of them are very good at controlling the board and just getting rid of those annoying creatures, or just throwing some damage at face in the late game. We're also playing Veteran Brawlers, which is amazing. It's a 2-mana 4/4, which that's some crazy stats. It can't block if we control an untapped land. I mean, this isn't really a big deal because we can just tap our lands. There's no mana burn or anything. But the main downside is it can't attack if the defending player has untapped lands. So if our opponent has an untapped land, we can't attack with it. And this is where all of our disruption cards come in. So we have Wasteland to kill some of those untapped non-basics. We have Rishadan Port and Ice to tap down their lands in upkeep. And of course Ankh Tide, just a great card in its own right. It can just remove a bunch of our opponent's lands from the game for 1 or 2 or 3 turns, and that can really let the brawlers attack. So for damage dealers, we have the Ankh, which goes to face, but we also have Lightning Bolt and Fire from Fire Ice. These cards are generally used to kind of control the board and kill annoying creatures, and then get thrown at the opponent's face during the late game. For other spells, we have Mox Diamond for acceleration and Standstill. Obviously a turn 1 Standstill is very brutal, and especially when combined with a lot of man lands. And this deck really does play a lot of man lands, so we always have stuff to do with our mana. So we also, as I mentioned before, have Wasteland and Rishadan Port, so really our mana base is giving us a lot of utility. As far as the sideboard goes, we have some classic red-blue cards such as Red Blasts, Blue Blasts, ways to kill artifacts. Winter Orb is very nice against mid-range and very slow control decks, and Pyrokinesis can just absolutely devastate creature-based decks. So really we have a lot of very good sideboard options. And in terms of other options, for playing the deck, you could play Lotus Petal instead of Mox Diamond. You could play Chain of Vapor. Chain of Vapor works very well with Ankh Tide. And if you don't want to play Standstill, you could play Fact or Fiction. So the hands we want really do depend on the matchup. In some we'll want loads of burn, in others we'll want to accelerate out a Standstill. Generally we're looking to put early pressure on with some disruptive elements. And when playing it, that's essentially what we're trying to do. We're just trying to chip in some damage where we can, while really disrupting our opponent's mana, until eventually we can land a Ankh Tide and just knock a bunch of their lands out for several turns, which usually will be game over. Of course, against creature-based decks, we're going to be looking to control the board with all of our burn spells and just stop them from amassing their critical threat of stuff. And when playing against these kind of creature decks, I do tend to side out a few copies of the Ankh Tide combo to prioritize all of those extra nice burn spells we have. Now against the deck, fast combos that can put stuff into play are an absolute nightmare for us, such as Stifle Naught or Reanimator. This deck really struggles with dealing with things once they're actually in play. As well, cards like Gush can really stop us from just tapping our opponent down and disrupting their mana. And so this deck does have a combo, but it's more of a tempo deck with a combo in it rather than a combo deck itself. I really would put it more on the aggressive side. We are just trying to control stuff until we can kill our opponent. So the strengths, it's very good against fair decks, and the Landstill package is great. It does have the surprise factor, as many people aren't really that sure of this deck, and loads of options. Also, being able to attack their mana base, attack them with burn, really does give you a lot of angles that they have to stop. The downsides are the terrible mana. We have a lot of colorless lands and Mox Diamond, which Sometimes you just won't have lands to discard, and fast combos and resolved threats. Once stuff's in play, it's really hard for us to deal with. And so here's an example list. This list actually did very, very well in one of the online tournaments, and it's just all around a fun deck to play. And here it is again in a more visual form. So if you do enjoy these videos, please do like, comment, and subscribe. Otherwise, thank you for watching and see you next time.